This is Janet Beagle. I am the Director of Graduate Programs in the College of Engineering at Purdue University. To get started, I just wanted to let everybody know where I am speaking from today. You may not be familiar with Purdue University, but we are located in Indiana, which is in the Midwestern part of the United States. And I'm not going to be talking only about Purdue today. I'm going to be giving some general application tips and some good advice for how to apply to a graduate program in the United States. But certainly some of the examples I'm going to use are going to be coming from my university here at Purdue. And I will introduce a little bit about my university as well for those of you that might be interested in learning more about some of our programs. So this is just a shot of our campus and one of the main, what we call the engineering fountains. Our campus is divided into sections where most of the engineering programs are located in a certain quadrant of buildings, and this shows some of those buildings there. The College of Engineering is our largest college at Purdue. It's one of the programs that we are most known for. And we do live in an area where there are 4 fun seasons. Usually at this time of year, we look like this picture down here in the lower right-hand corner, although recently we have had unusually warm weather, so we actually look a little bit more like this one in the middle right now, which is unusual for February, but that's what we look like here at Purdue right now. So I wanted to get started. Most of my presentation today is going to be focused on giving application tips, but I also wanted to start out just by giving a couple of ideas on why should we be considering study in the United States. And certainly the US is known for having top-ranked universities, and ranking is not everything. That's not something that should be your only reason for choosing a university, but it is definitely something that should be a factor as you're choosing between different programs and different opportunities. And one of the things that's available in the US is a large networking opportunity then, because there are a variety of top universities depending on the different rankings. And I am noticing those ink marks on my screen now, and I am not sure how to get rid of them. There we go. So the other aspects that I think are advantageous for study in the US, certainly we're known for having a strong research culture and infrastructure, access to a lot of resources, including a lot of the world's leading publications. A lot of engineering publications are written in English. A lot of them are produced and published here in the United States. There are funding opportunities, which I'm going to talk more about because I know that's a major concern for students. And then certainly kind of an obvious one, the opportunity to gain additional cultural experience. We live in a global economy. We work within a global job market. A lot of our major corporations and within academia and the cutting edge research that's happening is being done by global teams now, people from all around the world that are bringing different expertise to the area. And the more experiences you can have that help you understand different cultures, help you to build a global network, is going to help you further in your career as well. Now, I mentioned that the focus of my talk today is really going to be on giving tips for the application process. I'm going to assume that a lot of the people interested in this information are already interested in a graduate program, and they just want to learn more about how do I apply, how do I be competitive, what are the different opportunities out there for me in the US in terms of studying an engineering degree. This screen here shows some of the common graduate degrees, the terminology that you'll see. There are master's level programs, which are typically 2-year degrees, and these can either be thesis or non-thesis. A thesis degree is going to be a research degree where you conduct research, write this up in a publication. Non-thesis is going to be more course-based, where you're going to take more classes and you may do class projects and case studies, but you're not going to be conducting original research. Right? A PhD degree is definitely a research degree. You're going to be doing research as part of this. You're going to be writing a very large thesis or a dissertation, which is a paper summarizing all of your work. And depending on the type of program that you apply to, some may offer a direct PhD, where you enter with a bachelor's degree and earn your PhD. Others will require you to earn a master's degree first. So you earn your bachelor's degree, you then apply for a master's degree, and you can then continue on for the PhD. And that will really vary depending on the specific program that you apply to. Some disciplines are known more for encouraging either a direct PhD or requiring a master's first, and some will give you the option. They just have that open for the student's choice. And so that's something to be aware of if you're thinking about a PhD, that there may be these different options in how you go about getting that degree, whether you go directly in or whether you get a master's degree first. And then this last category on this slide are what we call professional or terminal masters. These are not as common within engineering, but I mention one in particular here, the MBA, the business degree, because I know there are a lot of students who are interested in engineering but also interested in business. And so I just want to mention this in terms of terminology. An MBA or some of these other professional masters are typically master's degrees that are not research degrees. They don't prepare you to go on for a PhD. These are the highest level degree you can get in that field. So typically if you get an MBA and you're studying in management or business, that's the highest degree you get in that field. You don't continue on. I also wanted to distinguish between graduate and professional school degrees here in the US. Different countries set these up in different ways. Sometimes they're in kind of the same university or same organization, and sometimes they're very separate. Here in the US, if you are applying for what we would classify as a professional school, then you would apply directly to a specialized professional school rather than a graduate school. And the goal of these professional degrees is to become a practitioner rather than a researcher. And I've given some examples of these degrees on the right-hand side of the screen here. And these would be things like becoming a doctor of veterinary medicine, becoming a lawyer, a medical doctor, these types of professions rather than becoming a researcher or an academic individual that's studying another discipline. Generally, if you are interested in more of a professional school, less funding is available. They tend to be self-paid, where the student pays for their own education, and then when they graduate, they become, whether it's a medical doctor, a lawyer, etc. There are some combination degrees, and again, for those that may be interested in engineering, particularly if you're interested in some of the biomedical engineering, there are joint professional graduate degrees where you can get an MD to become a medical doctor along with a PhD in things like biomedical engineering. We have a joint MD PhD program here at Purdue, and other universities have these as well. I won't go into a lot of detail on the difference between the master's and the doctoral degree programs and some of the requirements, but I wanted to give you a flavor of a typical program and how these generally look here in the US. A master's degree program is usually 30 credit hours or thereabouts. You have to maintain a minimum 3.0 GPA. Here in the US, we use a 4.0 grading scale. A 3.0 is equivalent to kind of a B average, or about an 80%, depending on your style of grading. The way the master's degree works is you'll submit a plan of study. Depending on whether you are doing, again, I mentioned that thesis or the non-thesis, you'll have a research committee that helps work with you if you are doing a thesis and determine what classes do you need to take that will help you do your research as a master's student. If you are non-thesis or doing more of a professional master's, it's going to be coursework only, and you'll generally have one rather than a whole committee of individuals that are guiding you because it's a much more prescripted kind of plan. If you're just doing coursework, then you choose from the courses that are available, you take those classes, and you graduate with a master's degree. It typically takes about 2 years. Some of the professional master's programs are condensed down to a shorter time frame. Some are in as little as a year or 18 months. If you're doing a thesis or a research degree, depending on the type of research you do, sometimes they can take longer than 2 years. So it just depends a little bit on the type of program that you're interested in and the work that you're doing. It's not uncommon to earn more than one master's degree. Sometimes in different fields or sometimes from different universities doing slightly different focuses. Particularly international students may have already earned a master's degree in their home country and then come to the United States, and rather than jumping into a PhD program, they start at the master's level. Or if they're not sure they actually want a PhD, they just get a second master's degree to become a little bit more specialized in that area. So that's kind of what a master's degree program looks like. On the other hand, a PhD program or Doctor of Philosophy program, these require 90 credit hours. So you can see right off that this is a larger time commitment. You can use the 30 hours from your master's degree. And to give you an idea of how these credit hours transfer, what this actually means, most classes that you would take at a university here, a standard class is 3 credits. And so if you're looking at a master's degree, you're taking about 10 classes. If you're looking at a PhD, you're taking about 30 classes. Most graduate students take about 3 classes a semester. Right, so that's kind of a lot of numbers that I just threw at you, but just to give you an idea of the scale of what you're working at here. When you do work on a PhD, you can apply 30 hours from your master's degree to the PhD. So I mentioned before that some graduate programs will require you to earn a master's before you earn a PhD. That's not lost time, because those 30 credit hours that you did for the master's degree can then roll into your PhD program. Okay. Again, you typically have to maintain a minimum GPA of 3.0. Some programs will have higher ones. 3.0 is pretty standard really at a lot of universities across the US. Some may be a little bit lower, and some certainly are a little bit higher. A PhD program definitely requires research. It needs to be original research that you're contributing to your field. And it commonly takes about 4 to 5 years. Again, depending on the type of research that you do, it can be a little bit longer if you're working on a more intensive research project. Some programs will require qualifying exams, and these are typically taken within the first couple years of your PhD, and it's to assess your general knowledge on different areas related to that particular engineering topic. So certain types of courses that you've taken to prove that you have that standard knowledge necessary to then continue deeper into the field. Not all programs require them, but some do. You will have to successfully pass a preliminary exam, and what that is an explanation of and a plan for your dissertation research. So you put together a proposal of what the research is that you plan on doing, how you plan on carrying it out, and what contribution that's going to make to your field, and you present that to your committee and sometimes other individuals from within your program. And we sometimes call it a preliminary defense, where you are defending what you want to do, what is your research that you plan on doing. And then once your committee approves of your plan, then you move forward with that research plan. So this preliminary exam happens at least 1 year prior to graduation, and usually earlier, kind of before you start really working on your research. Once you are done with your research, then you must successfully defend your dissertation. And so again, this is you coming before your committee Usually your committee is made up of 4 faculty members. That number can vary a little bit. And others in your program and in your area of research, and you talk about what your research was, what your findings were, and your methodology, and defend that to the committee. Once you pass that, then you are cleared for graduation and receive your PhD. It's very rare that a second PhD would be earned. So where a person may receive more than 1 master's degree, typically if you go for a PhD, you are specializing in a particular area, and that is your area. Once you have earned that PhD, that is as far as your education can take you as far as formal degrees go. Right, so the big question, of course, is always how do I pay for graduate school, and what does that look like at universities? Definitely money is available, and it is available for international students as well. Here at Purdue, more than 70% of our full-time international graduate students receive funding. There's 2 of the most common terms that you will use. The first one is graduate assistantships, and these are the most common type of funding. Within these, you will work part-time. Usually these are half-time assistantships, which means that the student will work 20 hours per week, and they may be doing research for a professor. They may be helping to teach courses, and that teaching may mean actually lecturing, or it may mean helping with lab sections or grading papers or anything that's part of that teaching component. Or they may be administrative in nature. So the office in which I work in the graduate programs office here, and we hire graduate students to help us put on different events and do more administrative type functions. But certainly the most common are either those research or the teaching assistantships. You work for usually 20 hours a week, and in return you receive a monthly paycheck and you receive free tuition. So you don't pay any tuition. There are some fees that you have to pay, usually around $800 a semester, and then you can pay for that out of the stipend or the paycheck that you receive. And there are sometimes other benefits as well. If you are at least half-time here at Purdue, you also receive health insurance and paid vacation. There are also spousal fee remits. So if you have a spouse that's here in the U.S. with you, they can take courses at a reduced rate. So there's just other benefits like that that come with these assistantships, a part of that. The other type of funding is much more competitive. These are more like scholarships. They're referred to either as grants or certainly fellowships is the most common term that you will use. These are less common. If you want to look at that kind of 70% of our funded students, probably 66% are on assistantships and 4% are on fellowships. Okay, so that these fellowships go to the top students that apply to Purdue each year. And these are scholarships that again will give you a monthly paycheck and a tuition scholarship so that you don't pay any tuition. But unlike assistantships, you don't have to do any work for this. This is just free money that is given to students to help support their education. And these are available to international students as well. So a couple of tips to be aware of. There are different sources of this information, and here at Purdue, we do have a list of fellowships available on our website as well, and I'd be happy to email with anybody after this if you have more questions specific about some of Purdue's funding. But the most common place where students will find funding will be with an individual professor, and this comes in the form of those research assistantships where you're conducting research for a professor and in return receive free tuition and your monthly paycheck. And you can contact professors directly as you're starting to apply to graduate schools. You can reach out to them, let them know that you're applying, let them know that you're interested in their research, and find out if they are looking to hire any graduate assistants in the future. There's also funding that comes from the department or the program level. These are often in the form of teaching assistantships. They will sometimes also have fellowships. and then the Central Graduate School. And I've got a slide that's going to distinguish some of these different levels that I'm talking about. But the Central Graduate School office also has funding information. And so as you're looking at different universities, you want to make sure you're looking at different types of websites within the university, because there are different tiers where there could be something happening at the department or program level, and there could also be something happening at the central graduate school level. And then there are also other organizations. So certainly things that you may be aware of within your own country or internationally, such as the Fulbright organization, and Education USA even, I'm sure, is a repository of some of this type of information. But government agencies, different foundations, professional organizations, if you're a member of a national or international engineering organization, sometimes they have scholarships or fellowships or different funding that is available. One thing to be aware of is that you will be considered for some funding when you apply for admission. So your application to graduate school also serves as your application for funding. Some schools may have an additional essay or an additional application form for certain positions. And so this is, again, where you want to really look at those websites and see if they have additional information, because you want to be considered for every funding opportunity that's available. So while you'll be automatically considered for some, there could be other ones that you do have to apply for separately. And so you want to make sure you're taking a look at that as well. And like I mentioned before, you can also be reaching out to faculty members and professors, and you want to follow your individual program's guidelines on this. They'll usually have information on their websites where they either will say, you know, encourage you to reach out to professors, or they encourage you to wait until you're admitted and then reach out. But often there will be guidelines listed on that, but you can directly contact professors for sure. The eligibility requirements, the applications will vary depending on what source you're looking at. If you're looking at what we call external funding, so something not coming from within the university, but something coming from your government or a foundation or a professional organization, then certainly they're going to have much different requirements and application processes than what we'll have internal to the university. Most funding is available to start in the fall. The start of our academic year here in the US typically starts in August. And that's when our largest incoming class is. That's when our budget cycle restarts. And so most funding is available to start then. There are some engineering programs that will admit students in the spring to start in January or even over the summer, but they may not have as much funding available at that time of year. So that's something to be aware of if you're planning when you want to apply. And similarly to the application process that we're going to talk about here next, you want to start applying for different types of funding at least 1 year in advance, especially those that are external to the university. If you're looking at anything like a Fulbright, or if there's funding from your government or a professional organization, most of those deadlines are going to happen far in advance. So you want to be looking at them a year out. All right, so information on how you apply. These are the standard pieces of a graduate school application here in the US. And again, I'm going to use Purdue as the example, but this is pretty standard for most universities that you're going to be applying to. And I'm going to go through some of these points here in a little bit more detail. But there is an online application form, and there's an application fee. It's $75 here for Purdue to apply. Most programs will require standardized tests like the GRE. Some, particularly there are some engineering management programs that may accept the GMAT, which is the management test. English proficiency is required. Purdue accepts any one of these exams, either the TOEFL, the IELTS, or the PTE. And then your academic background. So transcripts, how you actually scored in your classes, your grade point average. A statement of purpose, I'm going to talk a little bit more about letters of recommendation, and then your previous experience, whether you've had work experience or summer research experience. These acronyms I have here under research experience are a summer research opportunity or research experience as an undergraduate. Those are kind of common phrases here in the US. But basically any research experience that you've had in your, either as an undergraduate or if you've been working on a master's degree. Any of your curricular activities, and a copy of your resume. In the box here on the right of the screen, I've got this note, and this is something to be aware of, is you definitely have to watch directions and check the minimum requirements. Every program is going to be different. Even though I'm within the College of Engineering, we have 13 different schools and they all set their own application requirements. And so it's important that you're looking at your particular program to see what the deadlines are and also what the application requirements are, because if you don't get the right information in on time, your application will not be considered. Okay? And you don't want to ever just be relying on your friend who may actually be applying to the same university, but if they're applying to a different program, they may have different deadlines and different requirements. Right? So even though it's the same university, the requirements and the deadlines can be different depending on the program. And this is the slide I alluded to earlier, just understanding a little bit of the structure. And I'm talking here again from a Purdue perspective, but this is a common structure at a lot of the larger universities in the US, where you have a central graduate school office. So we have the Purdue University Graduate School, and that is our central office that kind of helps maintain the overall academic rigor of the university. And they serve the main administrative function, where they manage the online application system, and they're the ones that will officially grant admission to anybody who applies. Right. The next tier down, we have college level graduate offices, and that's the level at which I work currently in the College of Engineering here at Purdue. And our main role really, among a lot of other administrative functions, is to act as a liaison. So I'm a person who can put you in touch with a lot of the right people that you would need to interact with around the university. And then the next level down is you have the individual school graduate offices. Here in Purdue Engineering, they're known as schools of engineering, but you may see them listed as programs or departments. But these are things like our School of Mechanical Engineering, our School of Electrical Engineering, our School of Chemical Engineering. Like I said, we have 13 schools of engineering here at Purdue. And these individual schools are the ones that actually set the admission requirements. They are the ones that will do all of the initial review of the applications, and then they will send their admission recommendations to the graduate school. All right, so they're the ones that are really that front line where they're doing all the compiling, the review of the applications, and then those students that they want to admit, they then send on to the graduate school, who does a final credential review, and then will send out the official admission letter. Right, so keeping this structure in mind, your first point of contact for any questions should generally be the graduate administrator in your particular school or program. Right, now certainly I am a contact for any of the engineering programs, and so I can be a first great contact for you if you're not sure who to reach out to. I can then put you in touch with the right graduate administrator. But once you've already started applying and you're already starting to interact with some of those people in the school, then that's the person that's going to be able to answer a lot of your questions about what the requirements are, what the program is like, the types of research that are going on, all of those types of things. So just a couple of tips if you are thinking about contacting a particular professor or a department. Some of these are common courtesy type tips, but I still like to mention them because these are things that we occasionally see, and it's better to approach this in a way that leaves a positive impression. Right, so the first item I have on the bullet list here, do not e-blast. It's kind of a term, I call it multiple people. And this is where you're sending the same email to a dozen different people, either because you're not really sure who to contact, or because you just are, we want an answer from all of them. And what students sometimes don't realize is that even though we are a large university, we do actually all work together, right? And so we know if a student has emailed all of us the exact same message. And this can cause a lot of confusion sometimes. And it may actually delay a response to the student because we all then think somebody else is responding, or it's spending more time than needed because then there's 4 or 5 of us that are all taking the time to reply when really just one individual needed to do that. So that does not leave a good impression when students send an email to a lot of different people at the same time. Right? Now, there's nothing wrong certainly with emailing a couple people at a time, or emailing somebody if you don't get a response, trying somebody else, but sending one email to a dozen or more people can be frustrating to a lot of us that respond to those on this end. A good rule of thumb is to look for somebody serving in that graduate contact or that graduate administrator type role at that school level, because they're going to be a really good contact. Somebody like me, who's a director of graduate programs, is an excellent first contact, because then we can direct you to the person that can answer those questions for you. And the main thing really is to do as much of your research first as you can. If we receive a lot of emails asking questions that are clearly stated on the website, then that tells us that you haven't done your research, you haven't looked at the information we've already put out there. It always helps me when I receive an email and somebody says, I've looked at your website, but I didn't see this. Because that lets me know, okay, this is someone that's serious enough that they took the time to read what we have already given, and now they have additional questions. And I'm very happy to respond to those, and I know a lot of my colleagues are too. Keeping your email short and polite, especially when you're emailing professors. They are incredibly busy individuals, and keeping it as short as possible, they're more likely to read it and get to the point of your message. And definitely engage, if you're emailing professors, with their research. Don't just blindly email people, but again, look up their website, look up some of their publications, know something about them before you email them, and say something about their research. Let them know, I read your article on this. I'm also really interested in that area. Either I've done some work in there, or I'm planning on studying that when I continue my graduate education, or something to let them know that you truly are interested in them and their work and are not just blindly emailing anybody in the directory. Right? That's going to increase your chances that somebody is going to, a professor in that case, is going to respond back to your questions and tell you more about what they do. The other thing I will comment when you're emailing professors directly, I already mentioned that they're very busy individuals. Oftentimes they may not respond to emails that they receive until they know a student has been admitted to the program. And this is because our professors receive literally hundreds of emails, sometimes within just a couple weeks, from students that are interested in working with them, interested in learning more about their research and looking for assistantships and those types of things. And so some professors may not respond until they know that a particular student has been admitted. It still never hurts to reach out to them. It never hurts to email them something short and polite, engaging, because it also always amazes me how much our professors remember. As busy as they are, and as impossible as it sometimes is for them to respond individually to every student email that they get, they often will remember that email that they received when they're then looking at the application or considering a student for funding or looking for somebody to hire into their lab group. And so it never hurts to reach out, and don't be heartbroken if you don't get an immediate reply back from a professor. Just knowing that their workload is very high, but they do often take those things into consideration even if you don't know that they are. And then my last point here, kind of going with that professor side, don't email only to ask for funding. Right? If you send out just an email that says, I'm looking for funding, do you have any openings? those are the ones that are going to be deleted without a second glance because those are the types they receive hundreds of. They're really looking for somebody that is interested in working with them, somebody that's going to be a good fit with their research, somebody that is truly interested in that type of work and is not just blindly looking for a funding opportunity. Right? So moving on, some of the different components of the test I already mentioned a little bit here with the standardized test. The TOEFL scores that are listed here are the overall Purdue minimums. Different universities, of course, could have different ones. And even within some of our programs here at Purdue, they may have higher level TOEFL requirements. But this is just to give you an idea of what the general is. And again, always refer back to the website and the individual program requirements. Transcripts is the other piece of the application that is required, and this is a document that lists the classes and the scores that were received. It does need to be an official transcript from your university. We would also need a copy of the diploma. Now, students can apply for graduate school before they have finished their final year of their bachelor's program. And in that case, they will submit the transcript that they have up until that point. And then if they are admitted, they need to provide their final transcript and their diploma before they actually start taking classes or when they arrive here on campus if they enroll that fall. Generally, if they've already graduated, they need to provide a copy of the diploma at the time that they apply, but then they need to actually bring their original diploma with them when they come to campus once they enroll and start taking classes in the fall to show that to our graduate school that, again, manages all the credential evaluations, makes sure that everything is legitimate and that the student really has earned their degree and those types of things. When the student brings their original diploma with them, we don't keep it. You know, we just have the student bring it so that the graduate school can look at it, and then we mark it in the record that we have viewed the original and that the student is cleared to continue on. That process can vary a little bit university to university, but the general flow of it is pretty typical. Often there will need to be certainly the final transcript and some kind of proof of degree, like being able to see the diploma. Here at Purdue, we have an online application system, and students can upload copies of their transcripts and a copy of their diploma all electronically. And unless it's requested otherwise by the program, those uploaded copies will be used for review. And then if the student is admitted, then again, they need to bring the final official documents with them when they come. All right? And so that can help speed up that process and just save the student some expense as well on the front end by being able to do all this electronically rather than having to airmail all of these documents over to Purdue. All right, and then when needed, and in the case of most French universities, this will be the case, we do need to see both the original language transcript and an official English translation that comes from the university. And that will be true both for the transcript or the list of classes and grades as well as the diploma. So just kind of continuing with the transcripts, any student coming to Purdue, and this is true with most universities here in the US, we must have the equivalent of a 4-year bachelor's degree. We do accept the 3-year Bologna bachelor's degrees here, and so for any of those French universities that award those are perfectly acceptable here at Purdue. And I already mentioned a little bit about the grade point average. We do use a 4.0 scale here in the US, and typically a 3.0 or a B is going to be your minimum. The statement of purpose is an essay that explains why you want to go to graduate school, and the directions for this can vary depending on the program. Some will give you specific questions that they want answered, and some leave it much more open. But I can give you just a few general tips of things that the committee really looks for as they're looking through these. And I can say that the statement of purpose is really taken into consideration as part of the application. I'll often receive emails from students that focus very much on their grades and on their standardized tests, and they'll say, I have an average score of this, and what are my chances for getting in? And that's truly impossible for me to say, because while the scores that you have from your bachelor's degree and your standardized test scores are very important, our faculty who review these applications look at the whole package, and that includes things like this, like your statement of purpose. And they really want to know kind of two things coming out of this statement of purpose. They want to know, what are you bringing to the table? What skills and backgrounds and experiences do you have that I should bring you into our program? And you can often think about this as a job interview on paper, right? They want to know, why should I hire you as a graduate student? And then the reverse side of that is they want to know why you are interested specifically in this particular program and university, and kind of how are we going to be able to help you. And so you really want to spend some time putting together your statement of purpose to address these two major overarching themes. You want to allow enough time, make sure you follow the directions, whatever they are, and keep language very simple and specific to describe what experiences you're bringing to the table and what you hope to get out of it. You don't need to do anything fancy. You want to just use a standard font and really answer that question, why should I care? And what I mean by that is to go one step deeper, right? The statement of purpose should be one level deeper than your resume. And what I mean by that is your resume kind of says what you've done. The statement of purpose should say, okay, you've done these things. Why should I care that you've done these things? What does that mean you're actually bringing? And so maybe you've had a research experience where you learned how to use a certain piece of equipment or a certain process or certain methods. And you can say, okay, I had this experience. These are the things I've done. Therefore, as a graduate student, I'm going to be able to take on projects in this area. I'm bringing that skill to you, right? Kind of take it to that next level where you really paint that picture of, wow, I really want to bring this student in because they have this skill and it's going to help me in this way. Right? You do also want to customize your statement of purpose for each university that you apply for. And then, of course, make sure that you send the right statement to the right university. Right? But you want to mention specific professors that you would like to work with. You can mention a couple different ones in the same area. And talk about things that are specific in that program as to why you really want to study there. As the reviewer, the faculty member wants to know that this is really your number one choice, right? And maybe it's not even really your number one choice, but that's the feeling you want to give them, that this is such a perfect fit, that this is where you want to come, and these are the reasons why. You like the work of these particular faculty members, you like the facilities, whatever it is that you can include in your statement that says, this is why I want to come and study in this program. And that mutual benefit is what I've been alluding to here, kind of showing what is it you're bringing to the table, and then also what can we do for you. And definitely proofread. And this goes back to allowing enough time. Make sure you have time to write it, to have other people proofread it for you to proofread it. It's such a simple thing, and it really can make such a big difference to make sure that your essay is written in the best possible way. Letters of recommendation is another very important part of the application, and these will be from a professor that recommends you to come to this graduate program. Here at Purdue, we have an online recommendation process that I'll walk through here in a second, but it has a form as well as a place where a faculty member can upload a letter. And it's important when you're asking a professor to write a letter of recommendation for you that in addition to just filling out the form, that they do take the time to upload an additional letter, or there's a section where they can leave comments. Because if that section is left blank, even though it appears as though it's optional on the form, if it's left blank, then that gives the perception that, okay, this professor didn't have anything good to say. They weren't really that excited about supporting this student. And that's seen as a real negative when your application is being reviewed. And so for any of those universities that do use a standard form with an optional place for comments, I really encourage your professors to include a letter along with the form that they're doing. And the reviewers that are reviewing your application, it's important to know, if I haven't mentioned this already, those who review the applications are also faculty members. They're professors here in that area. And so they really like these letters of recommendation because that's a pure recommendation. That's one of their colleagues from another university, could be from halfway around the world, but it's somebody that's in a position like them saying, I've worked with this student and here's my opinion. And so these letters are really very highly valued by the committee. I'm just going to go kind of quickly through this. Most universities will ask for 3, and they usually do want them to come from professors rather than others that you may have worked with. On the online application, there's a place where you can list who your recommenders are and their email addresses, and then send the recommendation electronically. So you want to make sure that you have reached out to your professors or whoever you're asking to be your recommenders ahead of time. Make sure they agree and are expecting this so that once you submit that on the application, that email goes to them. It's not a surprise. They're expecting it. Once your recommender receives that email notification, they can click on a link to go in and complete the online form and upload the letter. And then all of that is attached to your application as part of the online process, and it's done. So the good recommendation letters are ones that really highlight multiple strengths and can include specific examples. It's one thing to say that this is an outstanding student. It's another to be able to specifically point to examples of why that professor feels that you're an outstanding student. We look for letters that showcase academic ability, but then also describe research or other experience. And we also look for letters that can describe some of those things that we can't get as easily from your test scores and your transcripts, right? So those soft skills like leadership and organization and your interpersonal skills, communication, how well you work with others, those types of things can be really important and helpful to see in those letters of recommendation. And you can, depending on the relationship you have with your professor, help them write their letter. You can provide them with the information that this email is going to be coming, asking for their recommendation, but then also give them a copy of your statement of purpose, give them a copy of your resume, maybe even give them a little bulleted list of these are some of the things I've done or that I've worked on with you that you may want to include in the letter. That can sometimes be very helpful. So the timeline for all of this, as I mentioned before, the most common entry term is in the fall, which starts in August. Many deadlines are, I say by January 1 or earlier. Just in the last year, a lot of the schools of engineering have started backing up their deadlines. So we have deadlines as early as December 1st now. So a lot of deadlines are actually now happening in December. So you need to be thinking about applying very early. Really looking a year out. So by September or October of kind of your last year as your bachelor's degree student, or 1 year before you plan on actually starting graduate school, you need to really be starting this process. You need to be taking the standardized tests, getting those done and getting the scores submitted, writing essays, requesting letters of recommendation, requesting transcripts, really getting that whole process started. Because then by November, and in some cases it needs to be done by November, some you have through December to be able to complete that application, remind your recommenders if they haven't submitted their letters yet, and then really make sure that your completed application is received before the deadline. Give yourself enough time here to make sure this is all in before those deadlines come up. And most programs will begin making decisions starting in January and really running through March. Different schools have a different review process. And so this is another one of those points where you shouldn't panic if your friend has heard back and you haven't, because there can be a lot of variation just in the way they approach their reviews. But most will have their decisions out in that January to March timeframe, and they may ask you to accept an offer by April 15th is a very standard deadline here in the US, where we ask students to let us know, are you accepting our offer by April 15th? So that gives you a little bit of an idea of the timeline there. All right, so just the last couple slides, I just wanted to point out a couple things about Purdue engineering. If you are or you work with students who are interested in an engineering degree looking at applying to a place in the US, certainly I'll have my contact information on the last slide. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to talk more about some of our specifics. We are among the 25 largest universities in the US, and we're a top 10 engineering program. Some of our programs are ranked even higher. I think my next slide talks about that. We have an amazing array of facilities, equipment. Our professors that we have here are top-notch, and that comes from being one of the largest universities and also one of the strongest engineering programs in the US. We're also centrally located. You kind of saw where we were on the map there. One thing I did not mention under the funding, but that's really important to consider, is when you do receive funding offers from universities, is to consider the cost of living. How much money do you actually need to live comfortably in that area? And Purdue has a very low cost of living, and so you can live very comfortably on the amount of money that is given in our different funding packages. Other universities have much higher costs of living, and they therefore need to give more money to have it be equivalent. And so that's something to be aware of when you're comparing different funding offers, is that one on paper may seem higher, but if it costs a lot more to rent an apartment or to buy food or for transportation or whatever it is in that area, it may not actually be as much money as it looks like. So that's something to be aware of. Here at Purdue, we do have the #1 international enrollment for students that are studying degrees in STEM. So that's our abbreviation we use here. It's science, technology, engineering, and math. And we do have a very large population of international students across the university. 44% of our students are international, and specifically here in engineering, about 58% of our students are international. And a lot of that, again, comes back to that point that we are very well known for engineering, and so we attract students from around the world to come and study under our faculty that we have here. And we've got students and alumni from 140 countries, and I say, and beyond. You may or may not know that Purdue Engineering is the home of Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, and Gene Cernan, who was the most recent man to walk on the moon. We've had more astronauts in space than any other university. We've had 23 of our alumni that have gone on to be astronauts in space. So we have a very strong aero program here at Purdue. So I think I mentioned we have 13 different schools of engineering at Purdue. This is just a snapshot showing some of our rankings to give you an idea of where we are overall. Our graduate program is ranked #9 by US News. We've got the #1 Ag and Biological Engineering program. According to Shanghai rankings, the #1 civil engineering program in the world. And then several other that are certainly in the top 10. So something that Purdue is known for. All right, so the last slide that I have here does have my contact information. Feel free to send me an email. If you'd like a copy of this presentation as well, feel free to send me an email and I can email you a handout with the slides. There is also a handout in the webinar screen that just has some general graduate application tips that may be very helpful. Feel free to share that with others who may find that helpful as well. And that also has my email address on it. So you are welcome to use that and reach out to me at any time. If we have time, I'm happy to answer any questions that may come up here. But I'm also available again through that email address if you would ever like to email me or other questions come up in the future.